In today's video, we're going to answer the question, can I retire at 58 years old with $800,000? Over the past 11 years in the financial industry, I've had clients with all sorts of wealth ask the exact question, and the process that I'm going to show you in this video is the same that I've used to answer those questions in the past. Understanding how much you need to save and invest are some of the biggest challenges retirees will face before retirement. That's why in today's video, we will be breaking down precisely whether someone with $800,000 can retire at 58 and the key factors that you should consider when considering your own retirement. So let's get into the video. So for our retirement case study today, husband and wife, 58 and 56 years old, and at this point they've saved $800,000 for retirement. They have money in an IRA, and they also have saved money within a brokerage taxable investment account. They also have Social Security benefits. Both of them have worked, and they do have a small pension. The husband has been a teacher for a number of years and has a small state pension. It's not going to be enough to cover all their expenses, but it is there, so obviously we're going to take that into consideration. This is something that often comes up. Somebody will come to me and say, Mark, we are thinking about retirement. We never thought we would look at retirement this early in our late 50s, but based on what we've saved, we'd like to know whether it's possible, what is realistic. So I'm going to walk you through that process that I go through with somebody in this type of situation, whether you've saved millions of dollars or a few $100,000 like in this scenario. I think this is the best process to go through to look at how ready you are for retirement, and especially early retirement. So let's look at that process, and then we're going to break it down for this couple. So here's our retirement income roadmap. In other videos, I've gone through this process, but I thought I'd just lay it out in this graphic to kind of give you a good idea from start to finish what this looks like. It's really hard to do retirement planning unless we know kind of what's the starting point, what's the end point. So here's the process. First thing is we're going to create a resource plan. And when we're talking about a resource plan, really what we're just trying to figure out is, okay, just based on what we've already saved in our Social Security or other income source we might have, what's actually possible, right? It's really hard to for most retirees to start building a budget and thinking, okay, well, this is what, I'm going to travel this much and I'm going to, have this type of lifestyle. It's really hard for somebody to just do that cold because you've never been retired before. And unless you have kind of an anchor, some place to begin or start from to even know what's possible, it's really hard to just come out of the blue and just start building out your kind of ideal retirement. So first starting point is, okay, let's just have a starting point. What is realistic based on what we've saved? And then from there, we can adjust. So first step with this couple is we're going to create a resource plan. Now, happen to be recording this video in October, and I set the plan for them to retire in January of the upcoming year. And actually, in real life, this is a very realistic and a good way to go about it, especially if you're looking to retire before age 65. And the reason for this is that we have to plan for early retirement health insurance. Usually what that means for most people is purchasing a health insurance plan through the healthcare marketplace, through the Affordable Care Act. And so when you're doing that type of planning, usually what we're doing is looking out at health insurance to be starting, in the upcoming year. Now, if you're retiring at a different point of the year, there's always special open enrollment periods for when you end employment to be able to sign up. But at any rate, this is a good time to, especially when you're trying to qualify for health insurance subsidies, to do that type of planning. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you subscribe because I'm always coming out with new videos about how to strategize an early retirement using the Affordable Care Act and qualifying for health insurance subsidies. So make sure you subscribe to not miss out on those future videos. So they're looking at a retirement starting in January. And this will give them a baseline of, okay, what's realistic from an income standpoint? Is it even possible? And then we can start to go from there to address other things like early retirement health insurance. So we have their resource plan. Now, once we've done that, we can start to say, okay, we have an idea of what's realistic. So now let's actually start thinking, okay, if this is our income level that's probably realistic, what are some things that we'd actually really like to do? Is there some traveling we've been putting off? Is there, other things that are just important to us as far as lifestyle, our own goals that we have, our own priorities that we really want to make sure that we factor into this plan. And so now we can tweak the plan to account for those things. Now, once you've considered, all the things that you think are relevant to your lifestyle that you'd like to have in retirement, now we need to fine-tune that plan. And especially for an early retiree, we have to balance tax savings with qualifying for affordable health insurance, because without that balance between those two variables, it can mean the difference of paying $100 a month for a health insurance premium or paying $1,500 a month for health insurance. And especially, and even more than that, actually, if you have, with an early retiree couple, if you have adult children who are still on your health insurance plan, or even teenagers that are still in your health insurance plan, this is something that's very relevant. So now we need to fine tune that plan, kind of hone it in, and see if there's any kind of improvements we can make on the plan to increase your financial well-being over the course of your retirement. So this is looking at things like health insurance. This is looking at things like doing Roth conversions, the sequence of what accounts we take money from and when we claim Social Security, all of that together to maximize income, reduce taxes, increase the safety, stability of your retirement income roadmap. Okay. Then once that plan is created, we need to get it going. So working with an advisor, this is where I would help somebody implement that plan. If you're working on your own, this is where you're following those steps that a planner like myself has laid out for you in order to actually implement the plan. Okay, I got to move this account here. I got to, I'm going to apply for this health insurance. I'm going to do this Roth conversion, or I'm going to, shift this money from here to there. I'm going to apply for my pension this way, right? You have to start the plan. Okay. Now, once you've started the plan, really the final step is you got to monitor it, right? Your circumstances might change. Your preferences, your goals, they might change. And so if they change, we got to adjust the plan. If there is if there's a major kind of tax law change that kind of upends the assumptions we've made about your plan, well, we got to update it, right? And so there has to be a mechanism in place to not just have a plan, but how to monitor that plan. Another factor here with monitoring is, how do we know if we need to make an adjustment? Just like if you're driving on the freeway and you're falling asleep or something, you're feeling a little tired, and you start to drift off the road, you've got those rumble strips on the side of the highway, right? Is there any mechanism that we can build into our retirement income roadmap so that if we start to drift and start to hit it, we get a little kind of a warning and say, hey, whoa, we got to make an adjustment. We need to tweak. So what is your guardrail, or what is your framework for monitoring and adjusting your plan over time? Okay, now we've laid down the process. Let's actually jump into this retiree's numbers. All right, so here we're looking at our household. So husband and wife, 58 years old. Let's take a look at their resources. First step of the plan. So they've saved $800,000, and like I said, that investment is broken down between two types of accounts. They have $500,000 in their IRA account, and they have $300,000 in a brokerage account. So a total of $800,000. Looking at income sources, what do they have? So right now in 2024, they haven't applied for anything, but obviously we're looking out to the future to see what things would look like. First thing applies to most people: Social Security benefits. What are their expected benefits? So husband and wife, husband has a primary insurance amount. Now, for those who I've got other videos on this, so and I'll continue to make more Social Security videos. Very important for retirement. Make sure you subscribe to the channel to not miss out on those detailed breakdowns for Social Security and how to maximize those benefits. So the husband in our situation has a primary insurance amount of $3,200 a month. Now, the wife in our example has a primary insurance amount of $3,800 a month. So, we actually, but kind of before this, I already ran through a number of different scenarios about, what's maybe the best way to optimize this plan. So in this case, we're going to look at the husband taking his benefit at age 62 and the spouse with the larger expected benefit to wait until full retirement age. Other ways we could have done this plan, but for this example, that's how we're going to do it. Okay. Now, also, this couple has a pension. Husband was a teacher for a time, so he has a small state pension of $800 a month, and that can actually begin in January because of his specific rules, and it does have a small inflation adjustment, so that will be an important resource for his pension. Okay, so now we have their resources. So looking at all of those things, what is realistic for their retirement? So here we're looking at their spending capacity. So in year one, what is realistic? Basically, the way that this would work is that they could pull about $7,400 a month of income, $800 a month coming from their pension, and $6,600 a month coming from the investment portfolio. That's the starting point. And now that we've determined, just as a baseline, what is realistic from a spending perspective, we can say, okay, How does this line up with what you would like to spend per month? Is having $7,400 a month, after tax and everything, is that going to be okay? So now that we can see that they're realistic, sustainable spending for retirement would be about $7,400 a month after tax, this couple can now all of a sudden start kind of thinking about their lifestyle with a little bit of kind of realistic context. Before that, you're kind of like, I don't know, what's realistic? I don't know, my Social Security benefit is this, or how much can you really spend off of your investment accounts? A lot of you who are working, you probably log into your company's 401k plan, and you're looking at your investment balance, or you log into Fidelity or something and see all of your investment accounts or retirement accounts together, and there'll be like a little dial right there that says, oh, how much can you spend on a monthly basis? And you got some number there, and you're like, wait a minute, is that my number? Like, what is realistic? Well, most of the time, those are not even particularly helpful, because those estimates are not taking into consideration your complete financial picture, right? So now that you have this proper kind of starting place, $7,400, you can think about, okay, what are some things that we'd like to do? We want to be able to travel, my mom's getting older. I'd like to spend more time with her. That means, more travel and that sort of thing. And you can start to kind of dial it in from there and see if that number is realistic. Okay, so now that you've considered your specific goals and things that are unique to your situation, you can start looking at other considerations for your income plan, like tax planning. Okay, so now let's jump into their plan and look at how it might be adjusted to optimize for taxes. So now we're looking at different tax scenarios that this couple could do for their retirement. And one of the benefits, again, of creating a retirement roadmap, mapping out those cash flows through time, is now all of a sudden we can start to say things like, okay, what's the way to optimize this plan for taxes? Which is really something that you can't really do retirement tax planning unless you have mapped out your retirement cash flows for your retirement. If you don't do this, you're kind of stuck in this totally suboptimal tax planning method where you're just looking at, okay, how do I save taxes this year or next year? And that's just bupkis. It's not, anyway, that's not tax planning. That's just, I don't know. That's just whatever. That's something you do with your tax person at H&R Block, on April, 5th, right? So anyway, that's not real tax planning. So we're looking at their cash flows through time using some reasonable assumptions, and we're going to look at, are there different ways that we could take money out of these accounts, the way that we could sequence this in order to reduce taxes, increase financial wellness over time. So the baseline scenario that we used is one that's reasonable for an early retiree especially, and that scenario is this one right here, where they're going to take money first from accounts that are non-retirement accounts. And because they're younger than 59 and a half, this is really, a lot of the time the best method. So that they don't incur early withdrawal penalties. So they're starting with taking money out of their brokerage account, and then they go through time, and then eventually, once that is exhausted, well, now they're further on into retirement, and they can start taking out of their IRA accounts. Let's compare that scenario. It looks like with that scenario, I'm going to pull out my little drawing tool here. Okay, let's see. All right, so with this scenario, this is what we're looking at here. I know that I've got a bunch on the screen, and you might be saying, oh, what are we actually looking at? So right here, their average tax rate over retirement would be about 7% on average per year. Total taxes paid over this retirement, about $300,000. Total net income and total legacy. Legacy is the dollar amount that's estimated to be left at the end of this plan. They would pass on to family, that sort of thing. So $2.5 million of total net income and a little over $2 million of legacy left over. Okay, so now we're looking at all these different scenarios, and can we find one that's maybe more optimal overall? So jumping right to it here, we're looking at here a Roth conversion strategy. In this scenario, what we're going to do is they're still going to pull money for their monthly spending out of the brokerage account to start with, but they're also going to, we're going to try and do Roth conversions up to the 12% bracket, from the beginning of their retirement. And with this, scenario, you can see that the average tax rate has dropped down to about 2.6%. Total taxes have gone from like $300,000 for their retirement down to just under $100,000. Net income is 2.7, and their legacy has increased slightly to about 2.1 million. So let's look at that and see what just kind of an overall summary of that the difference between the two plans. So tax rate down by about 5%, total taxes reduced by $440,000. net income increased, and legacy slightly increased over time. So when it comes to tax planning, we have to consider some other things for this early retiree especially. We know that they need to qualify for early, for Affordable Care Act health insurance, because, I mean, when you look at it, those credits to them, for a, couple married filing jointly, easily, $1,500 a month that they could be saving on monthly health insurance premiums by how we actually distribute their income. So this is a huge part of their plan. And because of their age, 58 years old, we've got like 7 years of this that we have to take into consideration, and not to mention kids. I'm just assuming for this one that we have just a husband and wife, but if you had children, all the more so that it's important that this detail gets done correctly. So now, kind of a shorthand for looking at tax planning and Affordable Care Act health insurance. The 12% tax bracket lines up really closely with the line in the sand that applies to Affordable Care Act subsidies, and that is the 400% of the federal poverty line income for your household. Those two numbers line up really quickly. So if you want a shorthand method of kind of optimizing taxes for income tax savings and for health insurance, the 12% tax bracket, at least for a couple that's just, a two-person household, married and filing jointly, that's a decent shorthand. It's not exactly, but it's close. Okay, so that's what we're going to use for this scenario, although if this were, fully detailed, I would then take this information and go to ACA.gov or healthcare.gov, forgive me, and start looking at specific plans and specific dollar amounts to kind of fine tune this. But for today's video, this is a good starting point. So with tax planning, things that I think are relevant, we want to kind of have an idea of what this looks like from a tax bracket perspective. So this blue right here, this represents the 12% conversion scenario, and the yellow, this represents kind of, let's call it like the status quo, or kind of the conventional wisdom, whatever. So you can see that here on the left-hand side, these are the federal tax brackets, and along the bottom, this is as time is going on from year to year. So you can see that in the blue plan, right up front, because Roth conversions are happening, this taxpayer, this retiree, would be paying more taxes in the first 4 years of retirement. Okay, now is that worth it? So in this case, the retiree is paying extra taxes for this in order to have lower taxes for here and for here. So call me simple-minded, but let's look at the simple squares. Okay, look how big this square is. This square of taxes paid is much smaller than this square for taxes saved. Okay, so just kind of visually, if you want a shorthand to see if maybe this is making sense, I like to use that. Break even, I think, is relevant though. So all kidding aside, let's look at the break even. The break even, really what we're asking here is how long would this person, how long would they have to live in order for the taxes that are paid on the front end to be worth it, over the long run. So you can see this. I'm going to kind of zoom in here for our timeline. And you can see that here starting in 2025, immediately taxes are higher, significantly higher. I mean, if you look at the yellow plan, by 2029, cumulative taxes this retirees paid is only, $5,100. They've essentially had like zero taxes, right? While under the Roth conversion scenario, they've already paid $92,000. Okay, so we're going along from year to year. Dun, 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 dun. Okay. Now, where does this start to, where does this happen? Okay, so here we are, 2045. So we're like, okay, 20 years down the road, basically, 20-year break even, to where all of a sudden this retiree is now going to start gaining ground from a tax perspective. And you can see, I kind of like to look at the shape of curves, and we can see where there's a significant change in kind of the slope of this line over time. So you can see here in 2040, all of a sudden, the taxes under the yellow scenario, you see that we're kind of a straight line, and then we get to here and it starts to go boom, and it starts to really climb. Okay, so guessing this has much to do with Social Security benefits and the fact that this person is now paying a higher amount of taxes on their Social Security because they're pulling money from their IRA for income and then living on Social Security. And because of the provisional income tax rules, they're paying a lot more taxes. So that starts to accelerate. And then from here, after we pass 2045, this line just explodes. So you can see that the yellow line, right, we're we're going clear out, and by the end of, by the end of 2061, there's that $440,000 tax difference. It's important to look at the break even of the tax savings, because paying extra taxes, you look at, if you look at the summary of the tax savings and you see, okay, wow, tax bracket dropped by, 5%, huge, hundreds of thousands of dollars of tax savings, all wonderful. But sometimes the 90% of all that good stuff is not realized until so far out into the plan that it's then I think responsible to ask, okay, is it actually worth it? What is the likelihood that we actually get to that point to where we're able to, benefit from the fruits of the upfront investment of the Roth conversion? So that's why looking at the break even, I think, is relevant. Now, for this couple, I think the Roth conversion would be relevant. A couple of reasons. First of all, they are a couple. And when you are married filing jointly, or just a couple in retirement, you're going to have a longer joint life expectancy compared with a single person. And then also, I mentioned this in other videos, and for me, it's an important planning perspective, having worked with a lot of retirees over the years, is looking towards increasing, maximizing the financial well-being and stability of the surviving spouse. So, let's just say, stereotypical husband passes away, wife is left for several years on her own. She's going to have higher taxes. She's going to have less Social Security benefits coming into the household. Also, getting older, you're more vulnerable, mentally, cognitively. Doing things on the front end to increase the financial stability of that person on the back end, I think makes a lot of sense. So for this plan, that break even is about 20 years down the road. And for our retirees, that puts them at their late 70s. Still very, very likely they'll both be alive. And, with a couple decades perhaps left to go before they pass away. So in this retiree's case, we kind of hit the sweet spot between accounting for health insurance and early retirement, saving significant taxes over time, and the break even of that tax savings happening early enough within the plan to where it probably still makes sense. Before we go ahead and implement this plan, one thing that we need to, part of the kind of fine tuning of the plan is understanding, how sustainable, how robust, how strong is this plan over time. So what we're going to do is we're going to map out this retirement against what's happened historically. Now, there's a lot of methods of kind of as far as risk management go with a retirement income plan, and the method that I'm going to go through in this is to look at mapping our retirement against historical periods of time when there were particularly difficult economic circumstances and and really bad markets. So short example would be, okay, this all looks great and the market's been great, and okay, I hear what you're saying. I can have $7,400 a month of income. It all looks peachy. But what if we have another 2008? And most of you can think of people that you knew, colleagues of yours, you were earlier in your career who, they were retiring near that time, or probably at the beginning of your career around, the late 90s, or much earlier in your career, and you saw people who, were wanting to retire at the end of the 1990s because their investments had just gone through the roof, and they thought, wow, I can make more money in the stock market than I can in my job. And so you are probably responsibly asking yourself, okay, the plan looks good, but could it survive an event like that? How would my plan have done if I had retired, in 2006 or 7, right before the financial crisis? Well, interestingly enough, we can map this income plan against that. And obviously not everything's going to be exactly the same, but we want to use kind of the same variables and the same kind of income sources, et cetera, to see as best we can how it would have done, historically. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so for this retiree, we're looking at what if they'd retired below the great financial crisis. Over the course of a year and a half, stock market dropped by about 50%. It was horrible. A lot happening here on the screen, but we're looking at their income plan basically from November of 2007, with all the same stuff, assuming, the pension, the Social Security and everything, kind of like if these retirees were 20 years older and had retired at this point in time, what would it have looked like? A couple of things here on this chart. The solid blue line, this is their income they're actually able to spend, okay? And the line right here, this kind of shaded line, that's their planned income. Now, I haven't really talked about guardrails in this video. Again, subscribe to the channel. Always coming out with new videos about that, the process of managing over time. But essentially, it's the process of the ongoing monitoring and management of an income plan. If when do you hit the speed bumps? On the rumble strips on the side of the highway to know that maybe an adjustment, maybe you need to kind of just tweak the steering wheel and get back on track, right? And so essentially, what this is saying is that when you hit a guardrail, a lower guardrail, and that means that maybe you need to take a small adjustment downward in your income. Maybe, not give yourself an inflation adjustment that year, or maybe reduce your spending by 5%, something small, but by so doing, it's gonna, when you're on the highway and you hit the rumble strip, is it safe to jerk the steering wheel? No, you're probably going to crash and ruin everything, right? No, it's usually just to get back on track. It's just a slight tweak with the steering wheel to get you back on track. And with your retirement income plan, I think that's a decent analogy. That's really what it looks like. It's just a slight adjustment, nothing crazy. When you realize you're veering, you don't freak out and jackknife your car. You just slight tweak. Okay, so with this retiree. Oh, forgive me. And this last one, the solid or the dotted dark blue line, this is inflation adjustment. So we're going along. Okay. Now, inflation adjustment. Okay. October, their income went up. All right, we're going along. It looks like the markets have dropped enough to where in January 2009, we go from a planned income of $7,900. And now, because of that downward adjustment, looks like this retiree needed to reduce their income by $280 a month. Okay, so that was the slight tweak. They hit the rumble strips. Okay, now we're going along. Okay, now once we get here to 2010, okay, they get an inflation increase, right? Inflation's kicking in again. We had a couple years of very low inflation right after the financial crisis, with the economy being so depressed, but we get here to March 2011, an inflation adjustment. Okay, boom, they go up. And then from here, you can see that their spending, their income starts getting back up closer and closer to their planned spending through time. Okay, to where, once we get out here, 2020, and then even as they hit 2020 and 2000 and, even with some of those years that were not very good, they were able to get their spending back up. So this is a really good sign. So for a retiree in this situation, so for this retiree, as far as, kind of getting an idea of kind of maybe let's call it a worst case scenario, for example, being unlucky enough to retire right at the start of the global financial crisis, you can say, all right, so if you retire today and we experience another, something like that, would you be able to have a decent retirement and everything be all right if you needed to drop your spending by 5%? And so for this person, their planned spending is like, to start out $7,400 net, and they would need to reduce that by, $280. So let's just go from $7,400 a month to $7,100 a month. So they can then ask themselves, well, if we had to spend $7,100 a month, would that be okay with us? Is that enough? Okay, maybe what that means is, okay, and $3,600 a month, a year less. Okay, maybe that's one less trip, or maybe that's okay. Yeah, actually, that'd be just fine. We'd be totally okay with that. Okay, so this is a really good way to calibrate and make sure that the plan that you're implementing is one that you can stick with, right? We want our retirement income plan to be robust, to be strong, to be resilient, to not be, it's going to work just barely, if everything works out just peachy. We want it to work out even if things do not turn out as planned, and they, maybe we go through some rough spots economically or in the market. We want to know that our plan can hold up under those situations. So now we look at, okay, we're going to implement the plan. And with that historical analysis, we touched a little bit on the guardrail concept. And so I think I'll just leave it at that for this video. But that would be the method that we would then implement and use to monitor the plan. We would also look at, okay, is there a tax law that changes that kind of upends our whole scenario with health insurance or with Roth conversions or with, how capital gains are treated, anything like that. That would mean that we need to revisit the whole strategy of the plan and adjust it to optimize it for the new tax or legal environment that we're facing. So that's the way that somebody with $800,000 who is 58 could realistically retire. So for your situation, the variables are going to be different, the amounts are going to be different, and but going through an exercise like this can empower you to know what is realistic and what you could be doing, or how much you might need to increase your savings, or whether retiring now might be completely possible for your situation. So I hope this has been very, very helpful for you. Maybe this was even a little bit entertaining as well. Now that you understand the key factors to consider for retirement, you can ensure you time your retirement better. However, there are a range of individual factors that may impact your retirement that I haven't been able to cover in this video. If you want to explore the complexities of retirement timing and how they could impact your unique financial situation, click the link in the description, and I'll see you in the next one.